I do appreciate the opportunity to come and speak to you this morning, and I know you're here today to generally listen to and talk about and discuss the construction opportunities that lie ahead over the course of 2015 and beyond. But before I touch on what I think about is coming forward in 2015 and the opportunities ahead, I just want to set the scene and give some context to where we've come from. I think it's important to remember where we've been in order to look really at where we are and indeed where we're likely to go next. And what we had to deal with in 2008, the economic crash absolutely devastated our construction industry. 250,000 jobs were lost from the industry, and house building fell to its lowest level when we came into government in 2010. It was at the lowest level since the 1920s. Buyers were locked out of home ownership by the demand for lenders for even higher deposits. And when we came into power, we therefore had a very clear objective in mind to fix what we saw as that broken economy and to fix a broken housing market, to get Britain building houses again and get people into a position where they had the opportunity to own their own home again. I appreciate I'm biased, but I would argue we have now got to the point where we are delivering on that pledge. And let me just outline a bit of how we've got there and what we've done to get to where we are today. Our reforms to the planning system have put power back into the hands of local people. So rather than pitting neighbours against developers, and more communities now are becoming more and more in favour of house building in their area. And I'll just explain why. I know that there are some house builders out there and people in the construction industry who had real concerns over the new planning system, but it is delivering. What we wanted to do was move away from the top-down targets. And I was a council leader when we had top-down targets. And I know full well that in many cases, communities, councils spent too much of their time fighting top-down targets that were felt to have no real basis in local reality. And while they were fighting over whether they would build 1,000 or 5,000 homes, in reality, what actually happened was nothing got built. And it was important that we move away from that. And I think in order to make people more accepting of development and actually more pro-development, actively pro-development, we needed to move to a situation where people felt they were involved in what was appropriate and what development would happen in their area, and to trust people to make those decisions. And that means we can move from what was effectively a development and control system of planning to a plan-led system with local plans, and ultimately with neighbourhood planning into a proactive plan-led system. Because what we do with local plans is move to where local people have been consulted by their local authority, who are ultimately democratically accountable, of course, locally, to look at what the housing need is for their area, to build up the evidence base, to look at what they need to deliver for homes for their community for the future. And that leads to a much better debate locally, a debate around what homes we need and where is the appropriate place for those homes to be put. Neighbourhood planning takes that to the next stage. It allows a local community to come together to look at what is appropriate for them within the context of that local plan and how it could be laid out, where it should be laid out, and to look at not just the quality of design and build, but also the infrastructure, commercial as well as retail as well as residential. And that is paying dividends, because what is happening in those neighbourhoods now is they shift away from not wanting development. And in some areas where they've even gone to do neighbourhood plans with the absolute intent of making sure they won't have any development, as people come together, they start to realise that they've got kids and they want a home for their kids for the future. That means they need another house in the village or just in the urban area where they live. And maybe some other friend or relative wants to move in and they need a home for them. So we start to realise we actually do want development. What people tend to be resistant of is inappropriate, overscale development in the wrong place. Through neighbourhood planning, we're seeing communities starting to work out what's appropriate for them and what their real needs are. That's why in some parts of the country, where neighbourhood planning has come in within a local plan, we're actually seeing development in areas we've not seen it for years, and actually seeing people start to deliver beyond actually what even their housing need is. And those planning decisions are also being made faster. 79% of major applications were determined on time between April and June this year, compared to just 63% the year before. That's a massive improvement. I'd like to see it in the 90s, but it's a big, big improvement. And the support for new homes has risen dramatically in the recent surveys, from 28% back in 2010 on that old system to now 47% in 2013. And in one area, for example, where there had been a survey about a development where 70% of the population in Woodcote and South Oxfordshire actually had voted against having development. They've now had an over 80% approval for a neighbourhood plan with development in it. Being involved is really changing people's views about development. And in the year to June this year, we can show that this system is now really working. It's still got further to go, with 80% of councils now having their local plans published, but it's delivering. In the last year, we delivered planning permissions for 230,000 homes. That's the highest level we have seen for many, many years. And it's the equivalent of 630 new homes a day. So councils and communities are now getting their local plans in place. And I think what we actually need to do is to make sure that that process continues. We've got 1,250 communities across this country, covering over 5 million people now doing neighbourhood planning. And I want to see that go further and wider across our country. So I can say today, here's one policy announcement for you. I have no great plans for policy reforms on the planning side, either this side or the next side of the general election. What I am focused on in the planning part of my brief is how the system is working. So we have just consulted on what we can do to speed up and make it easier to do neighbourhood planning, and what we can do around the planning system itself with regard to, as you've probably seen in the press, permitted development rights, what we do for small builders, for small sites, and we'll be making some decisions and some announcements on that this side of Christmas. What this is doing is it's meaning that attitudes to development, to new development, are changing. And we're leading by example, and we are investing in the sector within our department. But I do think it's important that we're aware of the dangers that lie ahead of us. So let me just say something about what's been covered quite widely in the press at the moment, and that's the proposed mansion tax. Or the alternative idea of just having higher council tax bands. Effectively, they are the same thing. They both mean higher taxes. And plans for new homes with a new tax would invariably spread to more and more homes and further down the economic ladder. And it's often forgotten, of course, that to deliver either of these, it needs an entire revaluation, which tends to hit the most vulnerable people the hardest, as we saw when Labour did this in Wales. So people could wake up one day and suddenly find that their more modest home has suddenly been labelled as a mansion. And this tax can hit ordinary families and pensioners particularly hard, who have saved and worked but happen to live in an area that's seen developing high property prices. And we have to bear in mind that the council tax isn't a wealth tax. It was never designed to be, and it shouldn't be. It's a charge for local services. The current banding system does reflect that a larger home makes greater use of local services, but intentionally, it isn't a poll tax or a domestic rate. Both of those had flaws. So we have already taken a number of steps to tackle property tax avoidance by a small minority of wealthy people. And we've increased stamp duty on the highest value homes, where people actually have a choice about what they can do, and it's linked to what they can afford. But the council tax system, as a system, works. It could be and can be and has been in some parts of the country unpopular, mainly because it more than doubled under the last administration. So our priority with council tax has been to freeze it for everybody. And bills as a result of that in this country have fallen by 11% in real terms since 2010. And a further freeze is on the table as an offer for next year. What we've also been doing to give everybody a chance to get onto that housing ladder is investing billions in affordable housing. Over 200,000 affordable homes have been delivered since 2010 as part of roughly 500,000 new homes overall. And we've got plans to invest even more so that we deliver, with another 165,000 homes in the next 3 years, the fastest rate of affordable house building this country would have seen in over 20 years. And we've helped thousands of people get back onto the property ladder with schemes like Help to Buy, which offers a valuable alternative to the bank of mum and dad, by enabling people to buy homes with a fraction of the deposit that they would otherwise normally require. And it's vital that we do take every opportunity for our construction industry in 2015, because I want to make sure that we maintain and build that momentum. And it's not just because we need more homes, although that is clearly true. It's because the house building industry delivers more than just new homes to a community. It means more jobs as well. Take the Brockholes development in Huddersfield. Now, on paper, that development gives just 18 new homes being built by a small local developer. I think those small developments, even smaller than that as well, just 4 or 5 homes, are hugely important in our country. I want to see more small builders coming back into the market, building those small-scale developments, because they are generally local businesses, building at a high quality for local people, and they create jobs in the local economy. And Brockholes is a good example of that, because in practice there, what we've seen is our investment there getting workers back on sites that stalled, meaning the homes have been completed and offered for sale as well, and again, under the Help to Buy scheme. And it's also meant work for a range of suppliers within a 15-mile radius of just that one site. And there's obviously, as you all know better than I, a knock-on effect, a positive knock-on effect across that wider supply chain for the industry. After mothballing factories in 2008, brick manufacturers, for example, are now refiring their kilns to keep up with the increased demand. And in some areas, we're actually challenged about being able to get the supplies through because things are moving so quickly. That's thanks to a range of measures that we have taken and that the industry and companies within the industry have done to manage their businesses well through some difficult times. But it's also partly due to the work we have done to reduce the deficit. By doing that, we've been able to make sure that interest rates have been able to stay at a record low. That doesn't just help homeowners with their mortgages and their mortgage costs, but it also helps businesses who are looking to invest. Overall, the construction industry in 2013 was worth £90.3 billion to our economy. So we know it is a vital part of our long-term economic plan to see the sector and to see it continue to grow and develop. And the outlook is actually so much better now than it was just 4 years ago. So the challenge over the next year is to make the most of the opportunities that are presented to us, to make sure that people are aware of the offers and opportunities that are out there, that menu of options for people are available. And one of the reasons I'm interested in your conference here today, not just in the question and answer session, but in the feedback later on, is to hear from you what more you can do to boost the supply of new homes well into the future. But also, of course, what more we in government can do to make sure we are creating a framework that allows that to deliver, and what more we can do to directly facilitate that happening. And we have already acted on some of the issues the industry itself has identified to us. A good example of this is on skills and training for the next generation of people coming into the construction industry. It's an issue that every leading developer said was a key threat to the future of the sector in a report just this summer. So earlier this month, myself and Nick Bowles, the Minister for Apprenticeships and Construction at BIS, came together and organised a summit of some of the leading house builders to see how we can encourage more school leavers and those leaving our armed forces to consider a career in construction, and how we get those who have left the industry back in 2008 and thereafter back onto and involved in the industry. The result was a pledge from developers to create new jobs and new apprenticeships in the years ahead, and we will continue to work with them to make sure that, again, the framework is right to deliver on that, and that we educate people about what a fantastic career opportunity the construction industry offers. And I think this is vital. I think it's vital if we want to signify the increase we want to see in the number of homes that we build in this country. Again, because we want to see people have the homes that we need, and the importance of that to the wider economic health of our country. It's something we all know is necessary. We in government can invest in housing and we can encourage confidence in the sector, but it is the industry that actually develops and delivers the homes that we need. So I'm confident that by working together, we can address the issues that the construction industry faces and the challenges it will no doubt face ahead to take things further, to see that momentum build. And I look forward to making sure that together we're able to see that continued improvement in our housing market, not just for this generation, but also for the next. Thank you, and I hope you have a good conference. I'm happy if anybody's got any questions. I'm equally happy if you haven't, but... Yeah.
My name is Martin Blower of Power Technologies. I'm also the chair of the Federation of Piling Specialists.
Sorry, chair of...
The Federation of Piling Specialists.
Okay.
We're part of the NSCC. My question is, you've concentrated heavily on housing. There's a big construction issue out in the regions. London and the South East is working extremely hard. In the regions, though, construction is flat. I would say less than flat. It's almost non-existent. There are some small infrastructure projects out there, but we don't see any sort of recovery in the regions yet. What's the government's policy about encouraging that development in the regions, and what's your view on being able to deliver that over the next period, over the next 5-year period?
Sure. Well, look, I make no apologies for the fact I focused primarily on housing, and just from the point of view of questions coming up, that's pretty much what I'll focus on, because my portfolio is housing and planning. So obviously my focus is on that. But I will say more generally, if you look at what we're doing in terms of infrastructure investment and construction investment around the country, certainly from a housing point of view, actually it's pretty well spread across the country. For example, we've got over, I think it's about 55,000 people have benefited from Help to Buy. The majority of that is actually outside the South East. Very small percentage of that actually is in London particularly. But with infrastructure generally, I think we've shown that we've got an intent to deliver across the regions. And I'm an East Anglian MP, and we've felt we've been underinvested in for the best part of 20 years, particularly when you come to Norfolk and realise that the closest motorway to my constituency is actually in Holland. I'm particularly delighted that we invested in the A11 so I can get home a bit quicker, very late tonight or early tomorrow morning. And I want to see the A47 and the trains improved. But HS2, I think, is actually a really good example of where we sort of see how we do want to actually develop further across the infrastructure. And the Chancellor's obviously is talking about HS3 now as well. And that devolution of power. One of the things we did with the local enterprise partnerships and the local growth funds is move that ability to make decisions about growth and infrastructure investment and construction investment actually away from London. So it's not just done by people in a suit in Whitehall. And a good example of this, to put this in context when we talk about this, this came up a couple of weeks ago when I was up in the northeast. And people in the northeast were complaining that London gets far more money in all of these grant pots than anywhere else. And I politely pointed out that actually the Northeast Local Growth Fund was worth many, many millions more than had been given to London. So we are investing in those regions. I do appreciate this takes time to sort of filter through into actual construction and work on the ground. But we are very determined. And one thing the Chancellor and the Prime Minister said back from 2010 all the way through is we want to see the economic benefits spread right throughout the country. And it's also why we're very keen on devolving further, so that the big cities that tend to be that hub where things spring up from actually have the ability to do what's right for them locally based on their local understanding, working with local businesses, which is what the enterprise partnerships are all about. Yeah.
Minister, Alan Willane from Glenigan. I'm the Economics Director at Glenigan. Coming back to housing and planning in particular, the MPPF, our analysis does suggest that, yes, projects are, planning approvals are coming through more readily, and that the success rate particularly has improved. One of the things that came out from our analysis, though, was that it's actually the larger schemes that perhaps have had the higher success rate. Schemes under 10 units, less so. You were talking about sort of smaller firms and opening up opportunities for them. Are there any other measures that you could envisage coming forward to help really unlock those smaller schemes, which actually in a lot of respects are helping small villages and so forth to grow sustainably?
Yeah, no, you make a very fair point. As I say, when we have 230,000 homes approved last year, that's fantastic. It's the highest level in about a decade. But it's also noticeable that there is a much bigger proportion of larger sites than there's been, and a smaller proportion of smaller sites. And people in the room will know, as well as I do, that the SMEs in the building industry has dropped down quite dramatically. I'm very, very determined to do something about this. I think there's a range of things we can do. We've just been consulting on some of the planning requirements around developments of 10 homes or less. As tempting as it is to make a policy announcement right here and today, you're going to have to bear with me just a little bit longer before we announce our decisions on that. But we will do this side of Christmas. And I'm very, very keen to make sure that we do more for small builders, which is, and I mean by that people, because a lot of what we've done is focus on people building 15 and above. The Builders Finance Fund and those things are fantastic in getting things going again, but they're focused on 15 and above. So between now and Christmas, I expect you'll see me talking a bit more about what we're going to do, and I'm quite focused on what we do to reinvigorate the organisations, the individuals who build 1, 2, 3, 4 houses as much as those who build 20 to 2,000 houses. So I'm afraid I can't give you a complete answer today, but you won't have to wait very much longer. Yeah.
You talked about the numbers of new housing, the quantity. What are your thoughts on the quality of new housing that we're delivering now? Is it good enough? And if it isn't, what do we need to do?
Well, I can give you the perfect political answer to that. Yes and no. Yeah. There is some really good quality work going on. I mean, the majority of construction does fantastic work, and we see some really good problems. But there is always going to be people who build of a different quality to others, and the consumers have to take a view on that. And I'm not going to name and shame here this morning. But I think actually in terms of quality, there's a really important point with this. And it's not just about quality of build. I think for me it's about quality of design as well. And this is why I'm very keen on neighbourhood plans and letting people have their say on what happens and how it happens as much as where it happens. And that's because I think one of the reasons people are resistant, and I know, as a Norfolk MP, I represent a number of villages as well as urban areas. And one of the reasons people in villages tend to, and actually in urban areas as well, will tend to be resistant to development is what they're worried about is some developer coming in and sticking 500 or 1,000, not very attractive, totally out of keeping boxes on the back end of a village that doesn't integrate with the village, isn't part of the village or the urban area, and is basically just another housing estate. And I think one of the problems in our country, and as somebody who walks the streets talking to people quite regularly in my campaigning mode and street surgery mode, is I meet far too many people who live on very, very nice housing estates that have nice bits of green area in them, normally with a sign saying no ball games, no children, don't touch it, you can look at it as you walk past if you're lucky, and they never meet their neighbours. And I had quite an interesting experience over the summer where I specifically was in one very, very nice estate in my constituency. I was asking people if they knew their neighbour, and then I spoke to their neighbour, and hardly anybody could name their neighbour's first name, let alone their second name. And I think that's a really sad state of affairs, and I think that comes down to design. And the problem is, where we're building just housing estates, what we're building is places where people get in their car, go home, go in, watch TV, spend time with the family, which is great and important. Then they get back in the car and go to school, go to work, go shopping, go to whatever leisure activities they're doing, and then come home again. They don't have a reason to be outside interacting with people. And if they interact with people in the town centre or the shops, there'll be people from a much wider range, so they're not people they will really get to know in the way you did if you used to live somewhere where you pop down to the corner shop or the pub or wherever it happens to be. So I think we do need to do some more work around how we develop that. And I think one of the real challenges with areas that are talking to us about garden cities is we do not fall into the trap of building a core town centre with housing estates around it, and we just multiply the problem. And I appreciate this can be a controversial thing, particularly in terms of design, but I think the concept behind and the design process behind Poundbury, for example, is something a lot of people can learn from. That interaction, that mix of commercial, retail, residential in a way that means people are walking to things, interacting with each other, I think is a huge asset. And I think on the larger scale developments, we can learn from that. And I think equally, if we build in a better quality of design as much as a better quality of build, and they're both important, then people will become more accepting of development generally. And we move away from having that block on the end of a village that's out of keeping, often where those homes could look the same, whether they're in Norfolk, Suffolk, Birmingham, Cotswolds, or London, and actually a Norfolk home looking like a Norfolk home and a Cotswold home looking and feeling like it should be what it is, where it is. And I think when you do that kind of development with sympathy to the area, people are much more accepting of it. The problem is we've had so long of doing the opposite that there's going to be a cultural change in doing this well so that people can look and say, well, actually, if it's like that, I'm quite happy with that. And that's going to take a while for us to do that and to turn that view around with the public. And that, I've got to say, is up to you guys. I can nudge, I can cajole, I can moan a bit occasionally, because although we've devolved power, I have to make it clear we haven't taken a vow of silence. But ultimately, it's up to the industry what you build. So you are going to set now the trend and the challenges for yourself in the future in that way. So yeah, absolutely, the challenge is to build in a better quality. Thank you very much this morning. I've just had I'll tell you, one more. It's always the one more that goes horribly wrong, but we'll see how it goes this morning.
Minister, I'm Don O'Sullivan of Galliard Homes. Part of the success in the delivery and increase of the numbers of housing is associated with the permitted development rights that were introduced in 2013. There is a big uncertainty in the industry associated with the end date, currently at June 2016. Can you give any indication or certainty as to, is that going to be extended, and when are we likely to find out? Thank you.
In terms of whether it will be extended, no. I can't tell you that now, because again, as tempting as it is to announce policies here today, the Speaker of the House tends to like us to announce things in Parliament first. But in terms of giving you some certainty about getting some answer to that soon, because I know people have raised the issue that if you're looking at projects now, bear in mind the end date is just over a year away. Actually, that's quite a short time frame to get things organised and done. I will be responding and taking some decisions and announcements about that before Christmas. So just a matter of weeks, if you can bear with us. Actually, that was not the worst last question I could have possibly asked, so I'm going to quit and go while I'm ahead. Have a really good conference. Thank you for having me here today, and thank you very much for your questions. Thank you.